Hi everyone, I'm Jo from Country Cow Designs, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make the Cornish Backpack, which is one of my own patterns. It's a bit different from a standard backpack. It's got the straps coming through the top of the bag, just for a bit of added security, so when you're wearing it, the straps pull it closed, making it difficult for people to get things out. It also means that you can use it as a tote bag when you want to. So it's quite a good size backpack. It can fit a standard laptop, so for instance I've got my Microsoft Surface here and that fits in nice and easy with loads of room to spare. It's got an optional zipper panel that lies flat inside the bag, which you can use just when you want a bit of added security. And it's got these two large front pockets which are designed to fit flip-flops because it's a Cornish backpack after all. But you could obviously use them to carry drinks bottles or anything else like that. And then it's just got your standard adjustable backpack straps on the back. So it's designed to be used with something like cork or vinyl or leather for the main panels, and it's got fleece as well for a stabiliser. If you decide to replace the main panels with cotton or canvas, I definitely recommend increasing the stabiliser. Maybe you want to use foam or something like that, just to give it a bit of extra sturdiness, or maybe some Decaville, something like that. I'll leave that up to you because the pattern really is designed for something like cork plus fleece, and then for me it's the perfect stability. I would also mention that there's a zip pocket, an internal zip pocket. That's where we're going to turn the bag through, so there's no mark in your lining where you've turned it. There's no binding or anything like that in any of my patterns. And in the pattern itself you can find where to buy these grommets. They're quite common, they're just 1 inch oblong grommets. But there's a page in the pattern where I show where I've sourced all my materials, just in case you want to know. So if you want to make the bag with me, you need to buy the pattern, and the link is in the description of the video. Or you can just watch me make it, it's totally up to you. But I don't show the measurements of the pattern pieces or anything like that during the video. So I think that's everything, and I hope you enjoy making it. Please leave your comments and just let me know what you think. So we're going to start with straps, and for each strap you should have a strap triangle, one large strap, a strap backer and a strap connector, and of course your rectangle ring as well. So what we're going to do first of all is start with the main strap, and you should have 1/2 inch on one end that doesn't have any interfacing. Don't worry too much if you forgot to leave that gap, but it's there because it just reduces the bulk on the end that's visible. So first things first, draw a line down the centre of your strap, and then you're going to fold over this edge without interfacing by 1/2 inch and press that. Then you're going to want to fold both long edges into the line that you've drawn, and if you take it over to the iron you can press that into place. Do it on both sides all of the way along the strap. Now this end you're not going to fold in, just going to leave it raw, so you'll fold in the sides but not the end, and then fold the whole thing on itself again. And what you should have is a 1 inch wide 4-layer strap. So here's one I did earlier. So you'll now have it 1 inch down the whole length, and what we're going to do is we're going to stitch all the way around. So what you should now have is one folded end and one raw end. So you need to grab your strap backer what I've done is I've marked 3/4 of an inch up and 1 inch in the centre, because this is 3 inches wide. And that will just help me place it, because what we're going to do is sew this on. And we want it to be 3/4 of an inch up and central on here. So once you've found your spot, what we want to do is just sew a little box about 1 inch high, and then put an X through it as well. So this doesn't need to be neat because it's going to be hidden from view later on, but maybe you can see better on the back. I've just done a square with an X through it, so it's going to be nice and strong. So I'll set that aside. I'm not going to do both straps in the video because it's just very repetitive and most of you won't want to watch me do that. So next you've got your strap connectors, and just draw a line down it, same as you did with your main strap. Fold both sides in. Here's one I pressed earlier. So both sides are folded in, raw edges on each end. And we're just going to top stitch down both sides with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So pop a rectangle ring on there, fold it over, and we're just going to baste along the bottom, maybe with about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. There you go. So you should have 2 of those that you need to do. Now we're going to make the triangle. So you've got your piece. I'm using cork. You need to fold this long edge over by 1/4 of an inch, and normally you can just press that, but because I'm using cork, I'm going to glue it. There you go. So you'll notice that I'm looking down, it's because I'm just making sure that I'm going along with the pattern in the order that it's written, so as not to confuse. Otherwise I have a habit of skipping about. So what we're now going to do is fold that in half, wrong sides together. So this end now should have no raw edges. So you should have this clean edge and this clean edge and these 2 open edges. Now what you need to do is draw a line. So what we want to do is turn this into a triangle and get rid of the raw edges. There you go. So what you've now got is you've got a nice little triangle. You've got no raw edges here or here, and you've just got this open section here. Right. Grab your connector and slide it in. So it's like that. Now you want about 1/8 of an inch gap down here, so you see that the yellow isn't quite up against the edge there. And you also just want to make sure that you're not going to be sewing through too close to the rectangle ring, but you want a pretty snug fit. What we're now going to do is top stitch both of those clean sides. Now I'd recommend changing to a bigger needle, because as you go through this bit just here, you're going to be going through a lot of layers. So I've changed my needle to a size 110 or an 18. And actually I've moved this over slightly. I want it to be probably about 1/4 inch away from the fold, because when I'm top stitching this little bit here, I don't want to be going through the connector. So I've moved that over a little bit. So there you go. As I stitched up there, I was just going through the cork, and then as I come across here, I would recommend actually doing this with a zipper foot, because I had to use my hump jumper to make sure that my needle stayed level. But there you go, there's one finished strap connector. Just trim off that overhang. So it's like that. And now we're going to put a rivet through it. So I'm going to show a couple of different ways that you can put rivets in, depending whether you've got certain tools or not. So I'll just make up the second one, and then I'll show you how to put a rivet through. Okay, I want to show you how to fit rivets. Unfortunately, I didn't realise that my camera wasn't recording properly when I actually did the rivets on my connectors. So I'll just show you how to do them on a couple of scrap pieces of leather. So what you're going to need is a scrap of cork, vinyl, leather, anything like that to put on top of your cutting mat. And then I'm going to show you how to do it with a couple of different sets of tools. So the first set is like this. You can get a set like this for like £10 off Amazon or eBay, and it's got everything that you need. It's not the simplest way to do it, but it's the cheapest, so a lot of people prefer that. And what it has in it is this tool that has a slightly curved end and a flat end, a hole punching tool, and you'll also need a hammer. I'd recommend a rubber ended one, but I can't find mine right now, and an anvil. So you get the pieces that you want to rivet together and place them on top of your leather scrap. Grab your hole punch, which is this one with a little hole on the end, and place it where you want your rivet. Now make sure that it's standing up straight, not slanted, and just knock it a couple of times. So as you can see, it's made a nice hole there. So what you now need to do is get a rivet. Make sure that you're using the right size. I'll use a gold one, so it should be sticking out a little bit. So that's the rivet with the post, and this is the little cap end, and you should hear it click on. Oh, no, that one didn't. Normally it'll click, but there you go. So what you now need to do is grab your anvil. It's got a big dent on one side and a smaller dent on the other. Make sure that you're using the size that fits your rivet, and you want it to sit in there nicely. So put that down. Grab this tool with the curved end and put the curved end on top of the rivet. Now you want to give it one nice swift hit. Make sure again that this is pointing upright. If it's slanted, the rivet will go in wrong. And that's your rivet. So that's quite often the cheapest way to do it if you haven't got a full set. Another option for making your holes is one of these. Make sure that you've always got it on the smallest hole setting. So this is the smallest and they get bigger. And you just simply punch a hole. Like that. And again, you need your rivet post and your rivet cap. Pop them together. And then you can use a press. Now, when you buy a press, it's not going to come necessarily with the right dies, and the dies are these bits. So that's that bit and this bit. So you get different size dies to fit different rivets. So you need to make sure that you've got the ones to suit the size that you're using. I'd also note that although all of these presses look the same, they fit different types of dies. So I got this rivet press off wish.com, which is great, but then when I tried to buy dies from it from a UK shop, they didn't fit it. So you just need to make sure that you check what size the dies are before you buy them. So you place the rivet needs to be sitting in that little gap there. And then as you bring the top one down, just make sure that it's nice and central, and then give it a good press. There you go. So those are the two options for placing rivets. We're now going to do the zip panel. So you should have 17 inches of zip and one zip head. So just pull your zip open and feed it through the head. So you want to do both sides at the same time. So it's like that. Put it down and just pull the head on. Nice and simple. So now we need to figure out which end the head's going to be at when it's closed. So it's going to be at this end. That one opens, that one closes. And measure 3/4 of an inch in. Make a nice clear mark on both sides. Actually, I'm going to mark it on the other side as well. Right, and we just want to open that up again. And we're going to fold it back. So this is the right side of the zip. We're going to fold it back to the wrong side like that. And then just sew it into place. So you should be able to match it up with the line that you drew. You can see my line is there. It's going to be 90 degrees and just sew it into place. Now, a lot of people will probably just prefer to do this on the machine, but I don't know why. I just like to do it by hand, and I can hold the zip in place, make sure it's not swinging around. And then I get a really neat 90-degree angle. So there you go. I've made sure that my stitches are in the seam allowance, so they'll be hidden later on. I can get rid of my pen mark with a bit of heat later because I'm using a heat erasable pen. If you're not, then make sure you only mark the back. But you can see I've got a nice neat 90-degree turn on those teeth. So I'm going to make sure that the other side matches and do the same thing on the other side. You can use a thread that matches the colour of your zip if you like. I just thought that to make you see it on camera, it'd be better to do it in a different colour. And just where it sticks out over the edge, just trim it down. So hopefully you can see there I've got nice neat turned teeth and they match well. If you're using a continuous zip like this and you can't get it to match, just take the zip head off the other end and just keep doing it until you get it to match. But there you go, that's nice and neat. Now before you go any further, you want to put your zip tail on, because you just want to make sure that you don't accidentally take the zip head off at any point. So you just want a bit of your exterior fabric. If it's like cork or vinyl like this, just use the measurement in the pattern and you can simply fold it over. And then I'm just going to stitch the sides, the open end and that side. So I'm going to leave this neat folded side unstitched. If you're using cotton or canvas or something like that, then the pattern explains the size that you need to use, but you just need to fold over so you don't have any raw edges like you can with cork and vinyl. There you go. I actually ended up stitching around all 4 edges just to see what it looks like, but normally I don't bother stitching this edge. I think I prefer it without. So that's the zip tail on. Now we can start constructing the panels. You should have 4 pieces and you need to fold over the edges on all of them by 1/4 inch or thereabouts. The most important thing is just to make sure that all of them are the exact same length. So grab your first one, place it right side up, and you want to be looking at the bottom of your zip, so upside down. Undo it, so you've got it like that, that's the bottom of the zip. And place it on top. Now you want this to be 1/4 inch from the end, so basically your zip teeth should line up with the 1/4 inch that you folded over on this end. So you should be able to feel that your zip teeth, you match the end bit there. Just clip that into place and then we're going to stitch it. So with this first piece, we're just going to baste it, and we're not going to do 1/2 inch on either end. And I'll explain to you why later. So you want to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Basically, you just want to be nice and close to the zip, to the actual teeth. So for me, I prefer to use a standard zipper foot, but then I can move my needle over, so I just move it over closer to the zip teeth. But a lot of people prefer to use a zipper foot, so just figure out which you prefer. So there's the first one in place, and when I say that we're basting it into place, what I mean is we're just going to use a long stitch length and you have to start and stop with back stitching. But now we're going to put the second one right sides together with it. So now that's clipped into place. You can see the right sides together with the zip in between. I'm going to actually sew that one, so back stitch at the beginning and end. But again, I'm not going to do 1/2 inch on either end. So fold these back so that they're wrong sides together and you've got the zip coming out, and take it over to the iron and press it from both sides so you've got a really neat finish before we top stitch it. So now you've pressed it from both sides, it should look nice and neat along there. And the reason that we didn't stitch the 1/2 inch on either end is because it now means that we can fold these back and make sure that they match perfectly before we top stitch them. Because generally you get a bit of stretching or something and you just end up with a really wonky end. So I like to be really careful, and then this means that I can match it up so that the two ends are really neat. So I've done that on both ends. I just spent a bit of time, that one's come a bit loose, fiddling them until they're just perfect. And now I'm going to top stitch the whole lot and just baste along this open edge. There you go. So it's got a nice neat end. You haven't got like the bottom piece sticking out or anything like that. And then I'm just going to do the exact same thing on the other side. This is my finished zip panel, and the reason that we left the 1/2 inches undone on the end is so that we can make sure that these line up absolutely perfectly on both ends. So there you go. Set that aside, and now we're going to move on to the front of the exterior. Should have 2 pocket pieces, and you need to put them right sides together. If you've got a directional print like me, just make sure that, say my birds are both facing the same way, both facing upwards. So we want to clip it together, right sides together, along the long edge. Now we're going to sew this at the top. So take it over to your iron and press this seam open. So I've pressed my seam open, and then I've pressed it again so that it's a nice clean edge for me to top stitch. So now we're just going to top stitch that. So you want to put your stitch length a little bit longer maybe. I generally have mine on a 3.5 or a 4 on my machine. So now you're going to need one of your main panels, your exterior panel, and you have a measurement on the pattern that tells you where this needs to be. So you just need to measure that. This is easiest with a quilting ruler because then you can check that it's straight. And then just clip it down the sides. You can pin if you prefer, but because I'm using cork, I don't use pins. Right, now you're going to draw a line up the centre of your pocket. Perhaps it would have been easier actually if I'd folded the pocket first, but just find my centre. So make sure you're using a heat erasable pen. There you go, so flip to the main body and you've got a line down the centre, and we're going to do now a top stitch from the bottom up to the top, across one stitch and back down. So we want our stitching to be on either side of that line. So hopefully you can see there my two lines of stitching on either side of my pen line. And now I'm just going to baste the sides so that they stay in place. When you're basting, you can use any stitch length really that isn't going to show in your seam allowance. So before we go any further, I'm just going to go and use a hot cloth to just take off that line. Okay, so we've now got the top of our pockets. What we're going to do is attach the top section. So I'm going to place that right sides together and make sure that if you've got a directional fabric, that it's facing the right way. So what will happen is it'll end up like this, and my birds will be upside down. So this is the correct way. So just line it up and clip it into place. And for this bit, we're using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now again, you need to press open the seams on the back. I'm going to do this with a little bit of glue on the cork side, and then we're going to top stitch both sides. Once you've pressed that seam open best you can, we're going to top stitch both sides. Because I'm using cork, the seam, I haven't pressed it open with an iron, so it's not holding particularly well, so I'm just going to keep adjusting it as I go. you'll see that both seams are completely open now. So if you want to, you can add a rivet here, just as a little feature between the pocket stitches, or you can add one on each side, anything like that. I'm not going to on this one, so I'm just going to move on to the next step. So the next thing to do is to attach your strap triangles, and on the pattern it will tell you to mark a certain height up. So I've done that, and now I'm going to match these up to the mark and just clip them into place. So you might think it's a bit odd that we're attaching these to the front panel, but the reason we're doing that is because when we press the seams open later, then they'll be folded back. So it sits a lot neater this way. There you go, so you want the rectangle at the top on each of them. And then we're just going to base them into place. You're going to want a nice big needle to get through all of this. Yeah, and I'm just going to use about 1/8 of an inch because I just want to make sure it's not showing. I always use about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance when I baste. So what will happen later on is, when we've got it all attached, we'll press the seams open and these will sit really nicely on the back. The back panel's a lot simpler. We just need to attach the top, so I've clipped that in place already, and now I'm just going to stitch it. I'm just going to take that over to the iron, press it, and then we'll top stitch it again. There you go, that's the back done. Now we're going to assemble the base. So you should have a foam piece and your main base piece. And you need to make sure that your foam's central in every direction. And then you're just going to fold those bits over like that. So What you can do is use double-sided tape or glue just to hold these bits in place. So I'm going to use some glue. That'll just hold it in place while it dries. So we're just folding over the long edges, not the short. These bits are going to be where the seam allowances are, which is why there's no foam. So we now need to attach the front and the back together. So what you want to do is make sure that these join up neatly on this line. This is the bit that you're really going to notice when it's finished, so join that bit first. And then just clip the rest. Make sure your rectangle rings are tucked in. Okay, so we're going to mark out some squares on the bottom for the corners and then cut those out before we sew the panels. So I've now marked out my corners and then I've cut them out as indicated in the pattern. And now we're going to sew the bottom of these two panels together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now we need to press open these seams and stitch them. So when I'm just doing cork, I just use my fingers, and then sometimes I use a little bit of glue or double-sided tape. But I think today I'm just going to keep an eye on it as I do it. So we're now going to stitch these seams open with 1/4 inch. Now, I'm going to roll this up so that I can get it into my machine. There you go, that's your seams open. So you now need your base, which hopefully has dried. What you want to do is mark the centres on these little short ends. Don't worry about these imprints, they'll work their way out. So you mark the centres so that then we can match it up with the seam. And there you go, your base should fit pretty much perfectly, as long as you've cut everything right and use the right seam allowance on the bottom. And now we're going to stitch around the whole of the outside of this, just to stitch it into place, but first I'm going to change to a matching thread. So I've changed over to a yellow thread, and now to make this a bit easier for myself, I'm going to roll these sides up and then clip them. So just want to make it a little bit easier to get it into my machine. There you go, that's the base. Now we're going to sew the sides together. So again, you want to match up these seams first, because you really want these to match. I know some people actually use like glue or double-sided tape on these, so they don't shift at all when you're sewing. But generally you don't have too much trouble with that. Make sure these are tucked in. And to do this, you're going to have to fold the base, but that's fine because it's foam, it will bounce back. Okay, there you go. I'm going to sew up the sides, just make sure that it sits nice and, yeah, everything's nice and even. These ones should match up perfectly. And we're going to sew both sides with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now, when you get to this bit with the strap connectors, you're going to notice there's a lot of bulk there. So I'm going to use a nice big needle, a size 110, and I'm also going to use a hump jumper to get over it and back down the other side, because otherwise sometimes you can just risk skipped stitches. So I've done my line of stitching, and now I'm going to do another line right next to this one within the seam allowance, just to give it a bit of added strength. There you go, so there's two lines of stitching there right next to each other. And now I just need to do the other side. So the next step is to match up your box corners. So because we cut them out, they should match up nice and easy, and you should, I've nipped that seam there, but that's fine. You should be able to get these two seams, this one and this one, to line up really easily like that, and the edges will match up too. So you just clip that into place. I find if I put a couple of clips further down, it just helps me keep everything flat when I'm sewing through it. Make sure you still got your big needle, because you're going to be going through the foam in the base a little bit, maybe, hopefully not. It depends. If you've got your base perfectly aligned, you shouldn't be going through the foam, but you've still got quite a few layers to go through. So sew it from the side. That in my opinion is the easiest way. And we're doing this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now do a second row of stitching just like you did on the sides. Make sure it's within the seam allowance. There you go. And I need to do the other side. Okay, that's your exterior. So if you want to get a really neat finish on the inside, you can press open these side seams and just glue them open. Or if you're just using cotton or canvas or something, you can just press it with an iron, and it does make a difference. So we're going to turn it out and just check all the seams. Your corners out on your base. Got a little loose thread there. So you should now have your exterior looking like this. I'm really happy with this one actually. This is going to be for me, and I don't normally make bags for myself, but I'm just loving it. So that's your exterior. all done and ready to go. Now we're going to move on to the lining. So if you're thinking that we forgot to fit the fleece, don't worry. We actually attach the fleece to the lining. I've done it that way in the pattern because I thought if you're wanting to use cork, vinyl, leather, anything like that for your exterior, then you're not going to want to fuse fleece to it. So first things first, for our lining, we need to create the little panel where the straps are coming out of. So you should have another top piece. You should have 4 of these in total. We've already used 2 on the exterior, now we're using 2 on the lining. So grab one of these, and in the pattern on page 15, it's got a little diagram for these 2 pieces. So make sure that you draw on the interfacing side. And what we're going to do is we're going to fix these and sew them on, a lot like you do with a zip pocket. So I've marked my piece where these need to go. And then I'm just going to put them on. Just make sure that they're level, that they're completely straight, and pin them into place. Now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew the rectangle, the little rectangle there. Before you sew this together, just check the diagram on the pattern and make sure that if you're using directional fabric that you've got these in the right place, because as you'll notice the gap here is not the same as here. There you go. Now you should have a little line with 2 triangles, just the same as you do on a zip pocket, and you need to cut those out. I didn't bother drawing mine on because I've done this so many times now. So you need to get as close as you can to those stitches, but do not cut through them on the corners. So you've got non-woven interfacing on these, which means you can just kind of press them with your fingers and not with an iron. So just fold them on each of your stitch lines, and then you should be able to pop it through the hole. And it's exactly like if you've done a zip pocket, it's the exact same technique. So you've now got this little hole. Just take it over to your iron and give it a press from both sides. There it is with it pressed on the front and back. So now we're going to top stitch around each hole with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So from the beginning you should have your straps, and what you want to do is pull one through one of these holes. So that the back of the strap ends up behind it. So what you'll have is your strap coming through and this on the back. And you need to make sure that your strap is central in the hole, and then we're going to baste the top and bottom to hold this in place. But as you do it at the top, do not sew through the strap, just sew through these. When you're doing the top, just fold this strap out of the way. So you know you've done it right because you can move your strap around. So the next thing I'm going to do to give it some extra strength is to sew another box around here. And we're gonna pull the strap forward again, so we're not sewing through the strap. But we're just gonna make sure that as we go over here that we're sewing through the strap. It's just to give it like a bit of extra support because it's a backpack. So you want to do this row stitching 1/8 of an inch away from the previous rectangle. Hopefully you can see that there's now 2 lines of stitching, and this bit here is going right through the strap, but not at the top. At the top, you've got 2 lines of stitching, and neither of them are going through the strap. Okay, so that's nice and secure, and now we're going to do the exact same thing with the other one. Right, now you want to fit your magnetic snap closure. So this is really helpful. You might think you don't need it if you're doing a zip panel, but it's just helpful if you're not using your zip panel much. It just makes sure that the bag stays closed. So I like to add it anyway, but you don't have to, it is optional. So if you're going to have your magnetic snap, you should have marked on this panel, there's a measurement in the pattern for where to put this. Then you want to get your washer, put it on top of that mark, and mark the 2 sides. Hopefully you can see that. Okay. You're also going to need a piece of fleece or foam or Peltex, whatever you've got handy, and just cut a little bit out. Place the washer on top of that and do the same thing, mark the sides. Use the scissors to cut the marks. And cut these ones too. On this, I would use a little bit of fray check if you have some. It just makes sure that you don't have any problems in the future. And get the female part of your magnetic snap and just put it through those slits. Then put it through the off-cut piece that you've got. Next, put your washer on, and then fold your prongs back. This has still got protective film on, so I'm just going to leave that on for now. that's that bit finished. Next, we're going to attach the zip panel. If you're not having a zip panel, you can skip ahead. So the first thing you want to do is mark the centres on both sides of your zip panel. So just fold it in half and just mark it. If you mark it in the seam allowance, then you can use any old pen. Do the same with the bottom part of this piece. Let's just fold it in half. These straps are going to be on the front of the bag, so you just need to decide which way around you want your zip, because some people say that if it's on the right when it's closed, it's left-handed. I don't know, I generally prefer mine that way, but because everybody prefers it the other way, I'm going to do it the way that's most common. So if you want your zip on the left when we're finished, when it's closed, then you want it on the right now. So this is right sides together like that. Match up those centre marks that you made and clip it. So this is the underneath of the zip, and they're right sides together, so that once we've sewn them, they're going to look like that. So I'm going to sew that together with just under 1/4 of an inch, like, you know, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, because we're just basting it. It's going to be sewn together properly in a minute. So although we're basting it, I've just made sure that the corners are really well backstitched because I don't want them to come up later. So to finish this panel, I've got my main lining panel. Choosing white was a bad idea. It's actually kind of hard to tell which side is the interfacing, so I've now written an eye on the back so I know which is the front. Okay, this panel is very similar sizes on both ends, so check which is which. Okay, now you want this right side up, and you're going to put this right sides together. You know you've got the right side because they will match. Okay, now you want to clip that together. Okay, so there's the right sides together. And now we're going to sew this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So that's why we basted with a scant 1/4 of an inch, just under 1/4 of an inch, because it means that now when we do 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is our standard seam allowance, the seam won't be seen from doing it before. You might find as you get to the zip panel that you benefit from using your hump jumper. So this is what you should now have, and I want to now press the seams open on the back. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to press all of the seams up this way, and then I'm going to top stitch it. So this is how it's going to be looking. Your zip panel is going to be pointing downwards, and on the back I've pushed all of these seams up. So when I now top stitch along here, I'm going to be capturing all the seams. This gets a little bit awkward because of straps. You can see there, that top stitching. I've just got a thread sticking out there. I'll just grab that. So that's that panel finished, and now you need to fuse the fleece to the back of it. And the fleece should be 3/8 of an inch smaller on every side, so make sure that you fuse it completely in the centre, and then it will keep the fleece out of your seam allowances. Now we're going to do the other side of the lining, which has a zip pocket. So I've drawn on there on my zip pocket facing the image that's in the pattern, and I've pinned it in place already. I actually decided to just draw a line to make sure that I can, so that's on the main panel, so I can make sure that this is completely straight. So now that I've done this, I'm going to sew, I'll just see if you can see that better. I'm going to sew the top and bottom horizontal lines, but I'm not going to do the sides because I just find if you do the sides, sometimes it ends with a bit of puckering in the corners. So I'm just going to do the tops. Now, because I'm using this method, I'm going to backstitch really well at the beginning and the end. And I'm also using a number 5 zip, which you don't normally tend to use on the lining of bags. But I couldn't find a zip that matched, and I decided that I'd just use the same zip that I've used for the external. So I'm going to make mine 1/2 an inch rather than the 3/8 of an inch that's in the pattern, just to accommodate the extra size zip. There you go. So now we're just going to cut the centre line and the triangles. When you're cutting the corners, you want to get as close as you can, but don't cut through your stitches. Again, if you've used non-woven like the pattern says, you're going to find that you can crease this a lot easier. So you can just fold it on every side of your stitching, and it just gives it a nice crisp finish that you can't get if you've used woven. So pull it through to the back. And you just want to roll your seams between your fingers to get a nice clean finish all the way around, and then press it from both sides. So there it is now that I've pressed it on both sides. So you can see that there's not much puckering on the corners, and that's because we only sewed the top and bottom lines, so that's just a nice way of doing it. Now you need your two pocket pieces, and you need to have them right side up. So just check. Yeah. You'll probably have a number 3 zip. That's what I normally recommend for lining, but like I said, I just couldn't find one that worked with what I was using. So right, what you want to do is have it right side up with your zip on top, right side up. Line it up on the top edge and just clip it into place. My zip's a bit longer than it needs to be, which is kind of handy because I can get the head out of the way. So now I'm just going to sew along the top with about a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So if your zip's the right size, you'll probably find that the head is in the way at some point. And what you'll need to do is leave your needle in, move the head, shimmy it underneath your presser foot, and then carry on sewing. Right, now we're going to get the other pocket piece, and we're going to have this one right side up as well. And again, we want the zip to be right side up. So you want to make sure that your pocket pieces are lined up nicely, that the two pieces match. And then we're going to do the same thing again and sew through this. Right, what you should now have is when you open this up, this is the right side of the fabric and it's the wrong side of the zip. And on this side, you've got the interfacing side of the pockets and the right side of the zip. So just take it over to the iron and press all around the zip. Be careful if it's a metal zip. This is actually nylon, but just be careful because it will get really hot. But you just want to press it to make sure that this lies completely flat. You probably noticed that I didn't specify which way the zip head needed to go. That's because the two pocket pieces are the same size, so it really doesn't matter because you can just flip it over to the way you want. So we're going to now sew this into our box, but to keep it in place I recommend using double-sided tape or glue just on the edges, and that will keep it in place when we're sewing it. So I'm going to use some glue. Now you need to bring your zip head in because you need it to be inside the box. I'm going to do this with the zip head on the left because I know that's what everyone prefers. Okay, just make sure that your zip's central. You'll also notice that I've tried to get the pocket central, and you just want that to dry before you stitch it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stitch with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. And as I get to the zip head, you'll notice that I leave the needle in, lift my presser foot and shimmy the head underneath. Go. So you'll notice that I had the top of the pocket poking up the whole time, because if this was down, then as you sewed along the top and then the bottom, you would sew the pocket closed and it would be useless. So just make sure this is up the whole time that you're doing it. Now you want to flip this over and you'll notice that one of your pocket pieces is longer than the other one. So I need to trim that down. And then I'm going to fold this up by 1/4 of an inch and press it. And I'm going to do the same on this one, but the other way. And that will make it really easy when we turn the bag later to sew the pocket closed with a neat finish. But before I do that, I'm just going to trim the excess zip out. So I'm just going to trim out the sides, and then I'm going to use a lighter on it. So you can do this, or you can use fray check, and it just seals the edges so that it won't fray later on, because zips can sometimes fray. So I've trimmed them and I've folded each side back. So I've got this nice neat edge here. Now we're going to sew the sides up. You'll notice that this comes away at the sides, so we're going to sew the whole of the side. And I think it's easier to pull it away like this and do it from this side. So this is the main lining panel, and then I can make sure it's out of the way and I'm not sewing through it by accident. At the bottom, make sure you backstitch really well, because you don't want that to come open when you birth it back. And there you go, you've got your zip pocket. But the bottom's still open because that's what we're going to turn through later on. So set that aside for a minute. You should have one more top piece left. So grab that, and you need to mark it according to the pattern, ready for you to put your magnetic snap on if you're having it. So we're going to do the same as we did with the last one and just mark the sides. Snip them open and treat them with a bit of fray check. Need another offcut again of foam or fleece or Peltex, and again we're going to mark the sides and cut them. Get the male part of your snap and put it through those holes. Run them through the foam. And then fold those prongs back. There you go. Just like that. So if you're not having a zip panel, you would just attach those two together, sew them together, and you'd be done with this side. But I've done a zip panel in this tutorial because I think most people want to have a zip panel. So this is where we're going to finish assembling the lining. Grab your main piece, your first lining piece that you did with the straps, and you want it to be right side up. Now, assuming you want your zip on the left when you're finished, it will be on the right now. So you're going to unzip it like this and get that piece that you just fitted the snap to. Now this is where it gets a little bit complicated. You need to measure above and below the snap and find the 1 3/8 inch measurement. Just got to find my measurement. So if you've got directional fabric like me, it's the top basically. Now you want this 1 3/8 of an inch bit here. You're going to grab this and we need to line up the raw edge. So if you mark this piece on center, I'll just fold it in half and mark it. And this should already be marked in the centre from earlier. And what you're going to do, just imagine this is closed, open it up, and just fold it over like that. Match up those centre marks. Okay, if you're in any doubt right now, this is 1 3/8 of an inch from the snap to the top. And all you need to do is do up your zip. And then you know that this is the right way around because the snaps meet up, and for me the directional print is going in the same direction. So you know you've got it right. So now we're going to just sew this together. Just baste it basically, because we're going to sew it again in a minute. So I've just basted that together. Just make sure that you're less than 3/8 of an inch with your basting because you don't want it to show in a minute. And also I've just backstitched a little bit over the corners so that these don't cause me any trouble in a minute. So the next thing to do is to grab your lining piece that has the zip pocket. Now I'd undo the zip for this bit. I'll make it a little bit easier. This bit's a little bit awkward, I'm not gonna lie. So you need to put it right sides together. There we go. Like this. I'll just clip it and then you can see, just to check that you're happy with the placement. So once you've clipped it, if you're not sure, just check. Basically, the zip panel is going to be sandwiched between the top and the bottom, like that. So you can tell that it's right because your zip pocket's at the top, and yeah, everything's just where it should be. So now we're going to sew this with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. It's going to be a little bit awkward because you've got this hanging around. As you're doing this, just make sure none of this is getting caught anywhere. There you go. So now if you do up your zip, you'll be able to see how the lining is going to come together, and the zip panel is going to be sort of sinking into the bag. We don't want it poking out. So just like we did with the other lining panel, I'm going to press all the seams up and then top stitch it to hold them in place. So press my seams up, and now I'm going to top stitch. Make sure that your pocket is out of the way, that you're not sewing through it, and make sure that nothing's getting caught as you're going through. I'm also going to use my hump jumper as I get to the zip panel, just to make sure I don't skip any stitches. Right, before we actually assemble it, I need to now attach the fleece to the back. So in the pattern it gives you measurements to cut a rectangle out of your fleece so that the pocket can go through the rectangle. And I'm just going to go do that now, and I'm going to fuse it to the back of this panel. So you should now have that fleece in place. Make sure that you pull the pocket all the way through, like the top of it and the sides, everything. So it should be a nice snug fit. If you're using a bigger zip like I am, you might need to just trim a tiny bit more fleece out to get a comfortable fit. So the next thing you need to do is draw 2-inch boxes on the bottom, just like you did with the exterior. Just remember that your 2 inches is based on the panel, because the fleece is a bit smaller, but you actually, just make sure that you're measuring from the edge of the panel, not the edge of the fleece. So once you've done that, do up your zip. I've got a twist. Make sure it's not twisted. There we go. Took me a minute. Okay, and just clip your magnetic snaps together. Okay. So I will admit this is all a bit awkward, but it's the only way to get the straps to work this way. So once you've done that, we're going to clip the whole thing together before we snip it. Make sure that your joins are lined up again. Clip them in place first. And now just cut these out. So my corners are all cut out, and now I'm going to sew the bottoms together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So it doesn't instruct it in the pattern, but if you want to, you can actually open it up and just top stitch those seams, which I think I'm going to do. It's a bit of extra work and it's not going to be particularly simple because this is attached here, but I just think it would make the base lie flatter inside the bag, which will give it a nice finish. So I've just clipped my two lining panels together and I've made sure that the joins up here match perfectly. What else have I done? I've put the zip panel, like the zip tail, I've tucked it inside so I'm not going to sew through it by mistake. So now I'm just going to sew up both sides. There's a diagram in the pattern which shows how to make sure that the lining is a nice tight fit, but you need to make sure that you're using the correct seam allowances at the top and the bottom. So we're going to start at 1/2 inch and we're going to do the whole of the top panel up to the zip at 1/2 inch, but in between we're going to go a bit bigger. So just check out the diagram in the pattern and you can use that as your reference. I'd also recommend just tucking the straps in just so they're not getting in the way. Now I'm going to do exactly the same as I did with the exterior and sew a second line in the seam allowance right next to it. Okay, you're going to want to trim the seam allowance out, just take it down to maybe about 1/4 inch, and where you've increased your seam allowance you need to just do a few snips just where it sort of curves. Just like that. Don't actually clip your seams, you're just making it so that where it curves it's going to sit better. And then just trim your seam allowance through. Now you need to box out your corners just like you did with the exterior. So you just want to match up these two seams and then just clip it together and sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So just check that all your seams are okay on the inside, but it should be looking pretty much complete now. Now we're on to the final assembly, which is just the best bit, isn't it? So what I've done to start off, I put my lining in. I always like to check that it fits before I go any further, because every now and then if you've just sewn something wrong, like used the wrong seam allowance or something, then it doesn't fit. So I joined up my side seams and it does fit perfectly. So that's great. So now we need to put them right sides together. So what I'm going to do is put the exterior into the lining. So I'll just get my straps out of the way. Now you want to make sure that the side with your straps has the pockets on the exterior, okay? So I'll put that in there. And just remember that the exterior is a little bit bigger, so you're going to have to kind of give it a good push. There we go. Okay, so this is my strap side and this has got the pockets, so just make sure that those sides are together. Now put your straps in, tuck them in, make sure that your zip panel is in, and now you need to match up your exterior side seams with your lining side seams. So there you go, they're both sort of butterflied open and matching up. Just clip them in place. Now I'm just going to clip around the whole of the top, making sure that they're lined up, the two pieces, and you might just need to wrestle your exterior in a little bit whilst you're doing this. Okay, now we need to sew around the whole of the top with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So if you've got a machine like mine, you can just take the tray off and it's really easy to do. I think if you have a flatbed machine, it's easier to do it from the inside instead. So now you need to put it out. So you've got your lining and exterior separate. And this bit is optional really if you don't want to do it. Some people just prefer not to have the lining sewn in, but I like to sew the base in because it makes it have a really tight fit, and I just think it makes the interior look so nice. So what I'm going to do is I've got the base from my exterior and the base from my lining, and I'm going to match them up. So like that, so that the base seams are touching each other. And I'm just going to clip the box corners together. So you want to make sure that you're matching up the seams perfectly, and you also want to match up the seam allowances here. So I'll just clip that one in place. Okay, so I'm going to now sew through the seam allowance close to the existing seam. So I'm going to sew through both so that they're sewn together. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So what we're going to end up with is it like this. But first I'll just change to a bigger needle. So if you don't think that your machine can get through all these layers, you've got a couple of options. You can either just sew a couple of stitches by hand just in the corners, or you could just try and get your machine through the corners but skip the centre where it's really, really thick. I know some other people, they even join it on the sides. There's a few different ways to do this. This is just, for me, this is the easiest way to do it, and I love the result. You can see here, I think you can see it, that I've just done the corner and the corner over here. I'm just going to do the same on the other side. I would normally go across the whole lot, but my machine does not want to do that today. So there you go, they're both attached on the box corners. Again, this is optional, and you'll see in a minute why I've done that, and you can decide whether it's for you. So now we need to turn it through the pocket, and I always forget to open my zip pockets, so if you just stick your hand in through the side, you can just grab the zip, you know. I always have to do this, but it's a little bit awkward, but it's not really a problem. So now put your hand in through the zip, and you just need to pull the whole bag out. So I'm going to start with the straps. So put your hand back through that zip pocket, and then you can pull the corners out, and you'll notice here why it's different, because the lining's sewn in, so you just need to be careful as you do this. But just take a bit of time pushing all the corners and the seams out and pushing the lining in. And then I'm also going to spend a bit of time rolling this top seam, getting it nice and neat. And I think I'll just give it all a good press as well. So this is what you get if you have decided to sew in the lining like I did at the box corners. Hopefully you can see it. Basically, it's just really neatly tucked in the corners because it's sewn in. So I prefer that finish, but it is optional. So the next thing we're going to do is pull the pocket out and sew that up. So just pull it out, and because you folded up the edges earlier, it's going to be really easy to sew closed. So I'm just going to clip it into place. I'm just going to sew through this as close as we can to the edge, maybe about 1/8 of an inch. So this will leave this seam on show just a little bit, but that's why I always turn a bag through a pocket rather than the lining, because no one will ever see this. There you go. So just shove that back in and make sure that you push the corners right in. So the next step is going to be to top stitch the bag. Now I've pressed mine on both sides. I, like you can probably tell, like to have like the lining just sitting a tiny bit further in, but it's your preference what you prefer. I'm going to now clip this all the way around the top just to make sure it doesn't budge when I'm top stitching it. There you go, that's clipped all the way around. Now put your straps inside the bag, because the last thing you want is to top stitch through those. And I like to use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on my top stitching. And when you're top stitching, make sure you use a longer stitch length, so I'm going to go with a 4. When you get to these side seams, I recommend using a hump jumper just to make sure that you don't get any skipped stitches, because it's slightly thicker on the side seams. And when you're stitching around here where the straps are, make sure that the straps are folded flat down, because if they're up like this or anything, you're going to either sew through them or they're just going to mess up your positioning with the needle. Right, now comes the really scary bit of fitting the grommets on the back, because you've got a perfectly finished bag and you're about to cut into it. So the first thing you do is lay it down so you're looking at the back, and make sure that it's completely straight, so side seams. Right. Now pull your straps out. There we go. And you want your straps laying completely flat, going directly up out of the bag. Now what you need to do is grab one side of your grommet. You can get different types of grommets. You can get ones with screws, but I've got these ones with prongs. So that side's got prongs and that side doesn't. So I'm going to use this side and place it centrally over that dot. Make sure the dot is right in the centre, and you should be able to feel your strap behind it. So you can just double check your placement. I can feel that the strap's there. So then I'm going to draw around the inside of this. And I'll do that on this side as well. So can you see that? Right, grab your scissors and you're going to chop through all of that now. So if you just fold it in the centre of that, you can snip right through, and you need to snip right through your lining as well, so it's coming out of here. Now you're just going to cut out the whole of the circle that you marked. Okay, grab one of your grommets and try and see if it fits. Now, you'll see with mine that there's still fabric showing on the inside. So what we need is to cut out some more fabric, and we need to make sure that the fabric cut is inside this ditch here. Now, if you try and stretch it to fit, because you don't want too big a hole, you'll end up with wrinkles across the back. So you need to make sure that your hole is big enough, but you also need to make sure it's not too big. Just keep bringing your grommet back and checking it. Once you're finally happy, what I like to do, because I want to make sure that this doesn't fray later on, I fill up this channel with fray check, just a little bit of fray check, and then I put that through and add on the other side. Now, if you're using a pronged one, you need to make sure that the prongs are on this outside piece, so that when you fold them back, they'll be showing on the inside. So I'm putting fray check in both sides of my grommet. Make sure that it's completely level with the top before you push your prongs in. And I'm going to use a screwdriver to push mine in. so that's what you should have when you've done. When you pull your strap through, it should line up perfectly. So I'm now going to do the other. So there you go, we've got both of the grommets fitted now. So make sure that your straps are completely straight, that there's no twists up here. And you should have 2 sliders. So grab one of those and just put your strap through it like that. Then I'm going to come from the side of the bag. I'm going to go through the rectangle toward yourself. And you want to push this up so that you can get access to the rectangle ring. And you need to go back up through here, back down. And you want to have maybe about 2 inches there. So this is a little bit of an awkward way of doing it, but this is the only way to attach the strap, so the bag can be like this. So once you've got that in there, you want to add a couple of rivets. So get one of them quite close to the slider. I'll show you this up close in a minute. And yeah, just stick another one through. If you want to be really secure, you can sew maybe a box on there as well. It will be a bit awkward, but it's definitely doable. There you go. So then we've got one completed backpack strap, which is adjustable. So we'll just do the same thing again. So we're going through the slider. Come from the outside of the bag. Lift this away from the slider. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what we're doing. And then we pull this down. Just make sure that it matches the other side. There we go. When you're riveting through this, make sure you're not riveting through the rest of the strap, just this bit that you folded around. that is now your finished bag. So the inside zipper panel should be laying flat into the bag, because most of the time you're probably not going to use it because the magnetic snap and the straps close it. But if you want that extra bit of security, then you can just do it up for just that little extra bit. So I hope you've enjoyed making that with me. Have a look at my other videos on YouTube. You can subscribe to my channel if you like, and then you will find out about new patterns that I'm bringing out. Also, if you want a bit of inspiration, you can join the Country Cow Designs Facebook group, which is great because everybody shares photos of their bags, and it's just great for a bit of inspiration and ideas. So thanks for watching.